Welcome back, everyone. So the episode begins with a conversation being had between Nier and Rester, with Rester inquiring as to what Nier's thoughts are regarding the current state of the investigation. And Nier goes on to lay it all out for him.
The current Kira is foolish and overconfident, not to mention unusually cooperative with the task force. So much so that I suspect he's working hand in hand with them.
And okay, that makes sense to me. I mean, I would agree that it definitely does seem pretty cocky on Kira's behalf to have sent the task force, this group of detectives that have spent the last 6 years trying to hunt him down, his own notebook. And honestly, when you really think about it, it's more than just cocky. It's actually mad disrespectful. He's basically saying that y'all are so harmless, such a fucking non-threat to me, that I'm willing to give y'all one of my notebooks because really, what does it even matter? I've had bowel movements that have made me sweat more than y'all. And to be fair, the overconfidence does make a lot of sense, especially considering the fact that Kira should actually know the identity of every person on the task force. And not because he's light, but because whoever Kira is, he clearly has ties to the NPA as a whole, as made evident by the leaks back in episode 3, and the fact that he killed Director Takimura back in episode 27. Like, I know the task force is supposed to be its own private thing where no one knows the identities of those who are a part of it, but I would argue that Kira would easily be able to find that information out. Like, when it comes to Kira, you have to assume that the current Kira also knew what Higuchi was doing, which is why Higuchi died within moments of being caught. Like, the current Kira would have had to have known who Higuchi was prior to the arrest, because that's not information that he could have gotten from the NPA database, given Higuchi hadn't been formally put into the system yet. So, using the fact that Kira knew about Higuchi, either because he was working with him, for him, using him, whatever the case may have been, and the fact that Kira had access to the NPA databases, that means that he should have been aware of the fact that Higuchi had to have done something that forced the NPA to put an end to the investigation. Like, he may not have necessarily known that Higuchi had Namikawa bribe politicians, but Kira would still have been able to see that the investigation had been put on an indefinite hold. And using that information, Kira would just need to look at what major changes happened at the NPA immediately after it was made clear that they were to stop working on the investigation. And what he would see is that a high-ranking officer, Chief Sorichiro Yagami, and 2 detectives, Kanzo Mogi and Tota Matsuda, all quit their jobs that same day. And since they were all a part of the original task force from 2006 and weren't a part of that mass exodus that happened at the end of that year, it would be easy to assume that they chose to remain on the task force alongside L. Then, when it comes to the night that Higuchi was arrested, it would also be pretty obvious that both Shurichi Aizawa and Hideki Ide were still working on behalf of the task force in some capacity as well, since they were the ones who gathered all those detectives to help apprehend Higuchi. Like, I imagine that both of their names came up in the incident reports for each of the officers that were there that night, seeing as then Director Kitamura had given them direct orders not to get involved as per L's request. Interestingly enough, the only person Kira wouldn't know about is Light, seeing as he wasn't an officer at the time and had never publicly been a part of the investigation. But since Kira could assume that following Higuchi's death, the task force ended up keeping and hiding the notebook, seeing as information regarding it was never entered into the NPA's database, it stands to reason that Kira would have likely been keeping tabs on all of them for the last 5 years. And probably would have eventually come to the conclusion that Light was involved in the investigation as well, given the amount of time he was spending with the other members of the task force. Meaning, realistically, Kira should know the identity of every person on the task force, which would explain the overconfidence and why he was fine with sending in his notebook, seeing as he could, theoretically, kill them all if he wanted to. Now, that being said, while I can understand Kira's overconfidence in regard to sending the notebook in, it still doesn't make any sense as to why he'd let them keep the damn thing. And this actually ties into the second thing Nier says, about how unusually cooperative Kira is with the task force. Because, realistically, he should be threatening them into giving both of those notebooks back, and yet he's said nothing about it. Like, he deadass has y'all's phone numbers and just hasn't hit y'all up for either of them? He's just fine with y'all having 2 death notes now? And I say 2 because he shouldn't be aware of Seto having taken one. But anyway, when you consider all of that, it doesn't come as too much of a surprise when Nier ends up saying,
That would make the second L in Kira. one and the same person.
Now, obviously, it's not a concrete theory or anything, and he even follows it up with,
Having said that, I'll admit that I'm only 7% certain.
which is actually kind of reminiscent of L, with the way that he would throw out percentages from time to time. But yeah, it's a realistic starting point nonetheless. Because here's the thing, even if Kira definitively knows who's working on the task force, that information doesn't help much in regard to knowing how much they've managed to accomplish in the last 5 years. Like, for all he knows, they could currently be gearing up to come knock on his front door tomorrow or something. I mean, there's just no way to be sure about what they've already figured out or what they're planning to do next. Unless he's right there in the room with them. And if he is going to be brazen enough to be in the room, then the safest position to be in is that of the person leading the investigation. Because if he's the one leading the investigation, then he can easily steer it in whatever direction he wants, specifically in the direction that doesn't lead to him and his accomplices. Like, what did Light say back in episode 20 when Ryuzaki suggested that he would do exactly that?
It's ideal.
Precisely. So, yeah, Nier's theory is solid as hell. Though, with Rester seemingly a little hesitant on agreeing with him, Nier decides to assuage any worries by saying,
Don't worry, Commander Rester. Making assumptions is part of any investigation. If we're wrong, all it'll cost is an apology.
And yeah, with the first 40 seconds of the episode out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the rest of it.
Episode 30, Justice.
So the episode proper starts off with this awesome sequence that does just such an excellent job of further exploring the new normal in this society where Kira has become, well, essentially the law.
There have been less crimes lately in Japan and around the world. It's because of Kira. My daddy told me that if you do something bad, your name will be written on the internet and Kira will kill you.
So things kick off with this disturbing speech that's being delivered by a young girl regarding why there's less crime in the world these days, and how it can all be attributed to Kira. And honestly, the very first thing that came to my mind during this sequence is this scene from episode 2.
Let's say that students were asked to discuss whether bad people deserve to die.
It's just wrong to kill people.
That's what they're bound to say.
Like, it feels too perfect to not have been intentional by the writers. Like, this scene basically goes to show us that Light has not only changed things by lowering crime rates around the world, but he's also managed to change the conversation regarding the idea of killing people in general. Like, at the start of this series, he spoke about people saying the politically correct answer when it came to discussions surrounding the idea of killing bad people. But now things have changed to the point where Kira seems to be a topic of conversation in schools. And from the sound of that girl's voice, we're leaning more towards middle school or even primary school. And I just love seeing this perspective on things, this unique view of how society is adapting to Kira's world. And I think what I love even more about these lines of dialogue is how they manage to make me feel extremely conflicted. Like, on one hand, the fact that crime rates around the world have dropped, I mean, that's a net positive for the world, right? I mean, less people getting harassed, assaulted, murdered, well, maybe not murdered, seeing as murder rates should be staggeringly high if they're calling what Kira is doing murder, which, to be clear, it is. But whatever, you get what I mean. Less crime is a good thing, but at the same time, think about who it is that's delivering this message. A child. This child is seemingly in her classroom talking about how her daddy told her that if you do bad things, someone, or hell, anyone can or will dox you and have you murdered. Like, that's disturbing. Extremely disturbing. Like, this little girl is essentially openly talking about homicide in a pretty positive way. And that's just weird. Except, for all intents and purposes, it's not. It's normal. It's the new normal. And I just don't know how to feel about that. And hell, honestly, it gets even worse, in my opinion. Because while we're on the topic of children in school, we end up switching to this quick scene.
Leave me alone! phone, or I'll put your names on the internet.
And it's just crazy. Like, children are out here just threatening to have people killed. And maybe at first glance, this instance of invoking Kira's name does seem somehow justified. I mean, if nothing else, it definitely looks like it's getting the job done, since we can literally hear the bullies whimpering after the threat is made. But no, this isn't how you solve problems. This is no different from brandishing a weapon, in my opinion. And look, don't get me wrong, Kira's not out here writing down kids' names. I hope. And I mean, regardless, he couldn't do it with just a name anyway. But really, the fact of the matter is, even with the first girl framing Kira's actions in more of a positive way, we see that it's really not that simple. In reality, what he's done is create an atmosphere of unbridled fear where his name is synonymous with a weapon, where even children cower in fear at the idea of being killed by him. Motherfucker isn't God, he's the goddamn boogeyman. Like, it's insane.
Come on, how am I supposed to file this report without your name?
Please, not my name!
So as we move into the final example that I'm going to go over, we see what looks like a young man about to be put into the system for an undisclosed crime that he committed. And as we can see, he is freaking the hell out at the fact that he has to give his name, for what should be obvious reasons. But what I found interesting about this is that I don't think he's committed any sort of egregious crime. And I say that mostly because of how nonchalant the officer is here. Like, he seems very indifferent about this whole interaction. Like, maybe this guy stole something from a store and this cop is just like, dude, come on, I gotta fill out this incident report so I can get home and watch the game. Meanwhile, this guy's over here like he's about to be executed on the spot. And this just kind of further speaks to the issue of how Kira operates. Like, I have no doubt that Light and Misa do their due diligence when deciding who they're going to kill. I wholeheartedly believe that they do not make these decisions haphazardly. However, no one knows what their thought process is. So, as far as the general public is concerned, when they see a person die out on the street, they probably have no idea what the hell that person did. Like, using this dude from episode 5 as an example, Light said,
"That man has been repeatedly charged with sexual assault. He's managed to avoid conviction every time due to lack of evidence."
Which, okay, cool, but no one here actually knows that. All they see is a random person just dying in the middle of a subway. Like, the lack of transparency in why this person died will probably leave people wondering what they did to deserve that. Now, multiply that by hundreds of people just randomly dying of heart attacks in public places around the world. What did they do that warranted being murdered? Like, it's easy to write off people in prison because obviously they've been convicted of a crime and you could just look up what they did that warranted them being killed. But random people on the street? People who were seemingly just living their lives? Like, what did they do? Was it something really bad or was it something minor? Did they kill someone and were never caught? Or was it because they just jaywalked a minute ago? Like, there's nothing that tells you what might wind up getting you killed. So really, it just results in people being absolutely terrified for committing even minor offenses, you know? Now, before we get to the next part, I want to take note of the fact that while this whole sequence has been going on, we could hear a specific theme playing in the background, and you might recognize it as Chi no Shi. And at first, it seemed like kind of an odd choice, since the theme is kind of tied specifically to the chief. That is, until we find ourselves in a more familiar setting. Though it's not immediately obvious given the choice of camera angles and the overall lack of color. But if you pay attention, you'll recognize the door surrounded by glass panes, the ebony couch and ivory coffee table, the kitchen sink adorned with an anthropomorphic family of 4 sitting on a couch, though in actuality the sink was never in front of a window, so that's whatever, don't think about it. Anyway, if it wasn't obvious yet, we find ourselves in the Yagami household, and this scene hits me in a way that's difficult to put into words. And I think the fact that it doesn't actually have any words is part of what makes it so poignant. Because, see, what happens here is that we discover that the house is empty aside from Sachiko sitting at the kitchen table, which is a pretty significant juxtaposition from the last time we were here back in episode 27, where we had the whole family just hanging out and having a great time together. Like, everyone was there, and it was just a home filled with happiness and love. But now, well, I mean, now things are obviously different. And given the clear focus on Sachiko in this scene, I want to frame what I'm about to say from her POV specifically. Like, for starters, her daughter is a shell of the vibrant young woman that she once was. Like, those guys from the Mafia took something from her that she may honestly never get back. In addition to that, Sachiko's husband of likely several decades is just gone, murdered by the same people who did this to their daughter. And her son, who thankfully is still alive and well, has just sort of retreated into his work, desperately trying to find the man responsible for all of this, leaving Sachiko just all alone in her misery, leaving her by herself to pick up the shattered remains of what once was a very beautiful life. And the scene gets even heavier because you see this container over here on the kitchen table? Yeah, I'm pretty sure those are Sorichiro's ashes. Like, it's not explicitly stated, but it seems pretty obvious that that's what it is, especially considering the fact that we never see a funeral for him, and the fact that cremation is essentially the de facto way of dealing with remains in Japan, which was something I was not even aware of until researching stuff for this video. But yeah, what we're seeing here is Sachiko just sitting with her husband's ashes, sitting in this home that she and her husband had built together. A home where they shared conversations and meals and laughs and arguments and love together. A home wherein they raised two smart, beautiful children together. But now, well, now she's all alone. And as the reality of her new normal begins to sink in, we see her literally fall apart. And it's just so, fuck me, like, y'all ever cried? Like, not stoic, single tear cry. No, I mean like full body shaking kind of cry. Like the dams behind your eyes have just completely broken and the tears just start flooding out. Like you're damn near hyperventilating trying to catch your breath between sobs. I imagine most of y'all have experienced that at least once or twice. I know I have. But I bring it up because that's the way she's crying right now. And it makes it painfully obvious that she is going through it. And I feel for her. I really do. But yeah, I guess before we move on, I should probably note that this is the last time that we see her. Like, ever. And actually, I forgot to mention this in the last video, but the opening sequence of episode 29 was actually the last time that we'll ever see Sayu too. Yeah, aside from Light, the Yagami family is just gone. And our final memory for each of them is just rough. So, yeah. Now, towards the end of this scene with Sachiko, the voice of Demegawa actually starts playing in the background, so let's listen to what he has to say.
I will proclaim this right here and now, to all the people of the earth, Kira is true justice.
And I'm not gonna lie, Kira's kingdom is actually kind of fire.
Kira's kingdom, huh? What a horrible title.
Or not, but whatever.
Good evening, it is my honor to be appointed by Kira as his spokesman. This is not a hoax, it's the absolute truth.
So, it's kind of crazy how he's not actually lying. Like, when I first heard that, I thought that he was. And I thought it was kind of insane that he would actually get on national television and lie about that. But no, he's kind of right. Or, at the very least, I could see how he might come to that conclusion. Because at the end of episode 10, Misa sent those tapes directly to Demegawa.
Mr. Demegawa, sir, this is for you.
So, yeah, while it wasn't Light who chose him, he was still technically chosen by one of the Giras. Now, from there, they decide to turn that bullshit off and turn on a press conference that's being held by none other than the President of the United States of America.
All they said was that it was going to be some sort of international announcement.
You don't do anything but watch TV, do you?
What?
So, while we may have lost the dynamic between Light and Ryuk that had been a staple of the series thus far, I won't deny that little interactions like this might be worth the cost, because that was actually pretty funny. Matsuda's like, tu, Ryuk? Like, my boy Matsuda gets shat on by everybody. But yeah, on to the president's announcement. And, spoiler alert, it's a doozy.
Good morning. I'm going to try to keep this brief. The United States
will no longer oppose Kira.
And yeah, not gonna lie, that's nuts. The quote-unquote leader of the free world has essentially bent the knee to Kira. He's bent the knee to a fucking serial killer with a magical notebook. Like, that's... That's wild. Anyway, after he says this, we get reactions from everyone, but obviously the scene focuses on Light.
Those cowards! I've even brought America to its knees.
Okay, fuck you, Light. I don't like the fact that you put it like that. Yes, I know I just said that the president bent the knee, but I'd argue that there's a difference between bending the knee and being brought to your knees. And I wouldn't say that I bleed red, white, and blue or anything like that, but as an American, go fuck yourself, buddy.
Are you saying that Kira is justice?
Justice? No, I never said that. But because of Kira, war and conflict have ceased to exist.
Huh. I guess I just never paid attention to that line during previous watch-throughs, because that's actually pretty huge. You're telling me that you've put an end to war? Like in its entirety? Because, I mean, if that's the case, then that's super impressive. Like, perhaps I owe you an apology. I wasn't familiar with your game, apparently, because I was always under the impression that your focus was just on killing regular criminals, like serial killers and predators, because that's all we ever saw. But I mean, this kind of speaks to the idea that I was wrong, because ending war? I mean, shit, go Kira, I guess. At least as far as ending wars and global conflicts are concerned, anyway.
We are not acknowledging Kira as a symbol of justice. We are simply saying that, as a country, we will not take any actions against him.
How is that any different?
I mean, I would argue that there is a difference. Like, he's not saying that they now support Kira. He's not saying that they're kikied up with him or anything. He's just saying, you do you. And honestly, I get the inclination given everything that's transpired. Like, no one's made any headway on this investigation for the last 5 years. And the last time they did have a suspect in custody, that guy was killed by yet another Kira. Meanwhile, the USA has lost dozens of agents across various departments. Hell, they've even lost the director of the FBI as a result of this investigation. And all the while, all statistical evidence supports the fact that the world has become a safer place with less crime overall. Hell, add to that a decent portion of everyday Americans seem to be genuinely supporting Kira, and are even going as far as putting names on the internet for him, or hell, in some cases even going beyond that, and it's just, I mean, I get where he's coming from. But yeah, the broadcast ends with the members of the press, collectively talking shit about him as his agents escort him out of the briefing room. And from there, we head back to the task force to get their reactions.
How can their government do something so cowardly like this?
Do you guys mind if I ask a serious question?
What is it this time?
Are you telling us you're not always serious?
Okay, these guys need to chill with the disrespect. Like, damn, this man cannot catch a break. Like, I think the only person in this room that hasn't talked shit about him is Mogi, and that's only because he doesn't ever talk.
Do you guys ever think that maybe Kira isn't completely evil?
What? So now you think Kira is justice too?
Wait, hold up now. Let him cook. Like, I get the urge to jump on him because it is a wild question to throw out there, but let the man explain himself.
I've been thinking about it, and part of me just doesn't believe that he is. I think that Kira's trying to fight evil and change the world in his own way. And, well, the world's become a good place for people who live honest lives, so maybe...
Okay, so let's stop here and talk about what Matsuda said, because he has some really valid points. Like, I wouldn't necessarily disagree with the notion that, from the perspective of someone who doesn't know who Kira is, Kira probably doesn't seem like he'd be completely evil. Like, what would be the point in specifically targeting criminals if he was evil? And even the idea of killing the members of law enforcement that are coming after him doesn't necessarily seem evil at face value. He's just doing what he needs to do in order to not get caught. Like, his only option to get them to leave him alone is by killing them. That's just the nature of how the Death Note works. It's not like Gias, for example, where you could just order someone to back the fuck off. So killing them's the only choice. The issue, however, comes from the fact that if you did know him, and if you did see the way he goes about conducting himself, you would realize that he's a fucking monster. If you saw the way he looked down on Ray Penber as he died, or the way he taunted Naomi after finally getting her to trust him, or the way he smiled at Ryuzaki as the light faded from his eyes, or the way he spent his father's final moments trying to manipulate him into doing something that he knew he didn't want to do, that's when you would realize that he's just a foul piece of shit. But since Matsuda doesn't know any of that, I mean, it's difficult to come to the conclusion that he's just completely evil. Hell, to be honest, even with knowing all of that, I hesitate to call him completely evil. Like, he did try to save Sayu a few episodes back, and he did that to his own detriment, so yeah. But to get back to what Matsuda was saying, he mentions how the world is a good place for people who live honest lives, and that's kind of true. Like, going back to the examples at the beginning of the episode, the little girl didn't seem afraid, and the boy who invoked Kira's name was using it to empower himself against those bullies. And even the young man who was with the police clearly committed some kind of crime that warranted being taken in. So, I mean, the only people who seemed pressed were the people who were behaving badly. So again, he does have a point. Though, as we went over earlier, it's not exactly as simple as that. And Aizawa is the one that goes on to present the other side of that argument.
You're wrong, Matsuda. People are only afraid of losing their own lives. How can you think that's real peace?
And he's right. It's fear. Simple as that. People aren't being better because they think it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because the alternative is getting doxxed and killed via cardiac arrest. Like, it's just terror. And hell, while it's easy enough to say that good people don't have to worry, that's really kinda bullshit. Because who's to say that someone won't just post your name on the internet anyway? Like that one coworker that hates your guts, or the dude at the bar that you rejected, or a student that you gave an F to, or a fan who thinks you ought to post more often. Just kidding about that last one. Loco's a cool dude. But my point is, anyone could just make some shit up about you, and if they're convincing enough, Kira could, theoretically, wind up killing you. And even if they're not, if you ever find out that your name was posted, you'll just have to live in constant fear that maybe one day you might be next. Like, what the hell kind of life is that? But with that being said, let's hear what Matsuda has to say in response.
I understand that. It's just that I can see why all those people call Kira a savior. I'm not like you. When it comes down to it, I've always been a really weak person.
Okay, pause real quick, because bro, a weak person? Like, this is what I meant about the inferiority complex. Bro has crazy imposter syndrome, because this is the same dude who broke into Yotsuba to try and get information on them. The same dude who threw himself off the side of a building to try and escape. The same dude who risked his life by going on Sakura TV and showing his face to Yotsuba Kira. The same dude who offered to do the Shinigami Eye deal so that the chief didn't have to. And the same dude who rolled up into that mafia hideout and started popping off like an Olympic shooter. Like, bruh, I need you to realize that you are him. But at the same time, I get it. I am very well aware of what it's like having imposter syndrome, and that shit is hard to overcome. Especially in his case, since everyone treats him like he's an actual idiot. But my apologies. Sorry for interrupting you. Please, continue.
I want to catch him. It's just that I can't completely hate him either. I guess I must be crazy or something, huh?
Nah, man, that's not crazy. That honestly makes a lot of sense. Like, from your point of view, you see things kind of improving. Like, hell, the fact that y'all can spend pretty much all day, every day working on this investigation is due in part to the fact that there's probably nothing else that really needs attention. Crime is way down, which, interestingly enough, is something that you mentioned as early as episode 3.
Well, I'm not saying this to support Kira, but in the last few days throughout the world, we've observed a dramatic decrease in the number of violent crimes committed.
And yet, here you guys are looking to find and arrest/execute the person responsible for that. Like, it's gotta be kinda strange when you really stop and think about it. It's gotta lead to some kind of conflict within you. So yeah, it totally makes sense to me, and even Light agrees.
No, you're not crazy. You're normal.
You too, Light? What are you talking about?
Okay, so to be fair, that's gotta be a little wild for them to hear. Because as far as they're concerned, Light should hate Kira. Like, the stress of the investigation led to his dad having a heart attack. Not to mention the fact that he was personally locked up for damn near 2 months, which he had openly attributed to the fact that Kira had framed him. And all of this on top of the fact that they're all working under the assumption that Kira also killed Ryuzaki, who was Light's mentor/friend. So, I mean, it's kind of weird that Light's like, yeah, no, it's totally normal to think Kira's not a total piece of shit. Like, what? I can understand Matsuda thinking he's not completely evil, but Light, more than anyone else here, should be like, fuck that guy.
I'm sure that on some level, Kira probably knows that what he's doing is evil.
Ryuk, shut the hell up. Like, this is exactly what I was talking about. Dude's a liability with all that chuckling. And, I mean, it's not like the laughing alone would get Light caught, but I just bet that if Nier was in the room with them, he'd have definitely taken note of that shit right away.
But he'll try to change the world even as a martyr, at the cost of his soul. That's his brand of justice. I bet that's what's going through Kira's mind.
So, interestingly enough, this is very reminiscent of something he said back in episode 1.
Even if it means sacrificing my own mind and soul, it's worth it. I'll do it. Using the Death Note, I'll change the world.
And I just thought that was a cool little callback. However, that being said, I find it incredibly difficult to believe that this is some sort of grand sacrifice, especially considering how much he enjoys not only killing his enemies, but taunting them after he knows that he's won. Like, it almost feels like a kink. Dude is definitely getting off on it. So it's weird that he'd think of himself as a martyr, knowing that he revels in killing innocent people. But I guess he could just justify it by saying that they're not innocent if they're coming for him, which, now that I think about it...
All those who would oppose that god, they are the ones who are truly evil!
So, yeah, moving on.
If Kira gets caught, then that makes him evil. But if he wins and rules the world, then I guess he's justice.
That's actually such a good point. And while I didn't think I'd wind up mentioning the same quote in both of these series, I guess I can't avoid it. Because this is also very reminiscent of Winston Churchill's quote, "History is written by the victors." Because basically, if the task force prevails, then Kira will go down as a crazy serial killer. That's all he'll ever be. But if he wins, well, he'll be revered as the god of the new world. So, yeah.
It's only a matter of time. Kira will be justice.
Anyway, from there we switch scenes back to the SBK as the four of them try to figure out what their next moves are now that they've been fired. I guess. I mean, did they just get fired? Are they not just supposed to return to whatever office they were working out of previously? Or... I don't know. To be honest, this scene is pretty quick and mostly inconsequential. It's mostly just Nier talking shit about the president and saying that nothing good will come as a result of this. Now, from there, we head to Lindner's apartment, where we see her getting out of the shower, and as she walks into her bedroom, she's accosted by Mello. Okay, I mean, No, we can make sense of this, I think. And look, I'm not confused that Mello's alive. I mean, that makes sense. Everyone else survived the explosion, so why not him? What I'm confused about is the fact that he's just here. That he specifically went here to Lindner's apartment. No, give me a second. Okay, Mello obviously had information on all of the people from the SBK. Or, at the very least, most of them. I mean, he killed all but 3 of them, or 4 if you count Nier. Now, how he got that information, I can't say, but, I mean, dude clearly has an abundance of resources. I mean, he seemingly found out about the notebook on his own. He got his men to kidnap the director of the MPA. He convinced a tenured pilot to hijack a plane. He managed to gain access to a secret underground bunker. He had a fucking missile on hand, and his hideout was intricately rigged with an insane amount of explosives. So, like, it's not too much of a reach to think that he could get access to the names and faces of some United States government agents, especially the director of the FBI, seeing as that would be the easiest of all of them to find. And hell, realistically, his name is all he'd really need. I mean, if Mello wrote down the FBI director's name in the notebook with similar instructions to what Light did to Ray Penber's boss back in episode 5, then the FBI director could have just sent Mello an email with the information shortly before dying himself. It could even explain why these three were left alive. Like maybe their files were just more difficult to obtain or something. Or hell, they could all be with the CIA as opposed to being with the FBI, which would explain why he couldn't get their information. But to be clear, I'm not saying that is what happened. I'm just spitballing here based on the information we have to go off of from the show. But getting back to this scene, somehow Mello knows that Lindner is a part of the SPK, and as such, he's using her so that she'll take him to Nier. And she actually does it. But why would she? It can't just be because of the gun. I mean, she's an agent. She's trained not to buckle in high-pressure situations like this. So I just... okay. So they leave the apartment and she takes him to their base of operations. And when Nier and company see them both, with Mello holding a gun directly to her head, they just let him in. Come on down, Nier says. Maybe he thinks he's protected by his little barrier. I don't know. However, I do appreciate the fact that while Nier seems pretty unfazed, Rester can be seen visibly sweating. Because, you know, one of their agents is being held at gunpoint. And not just being held at gunpoint by some rando, which would be bad enough, but this is a dude who's already killed like, what, 80% of their team? So yeah, pretty nerve-wracking, I would say. Which is why when they let Mello in, they immediately pull their guns on him. And when they do, we finally get a good shot of his face, which shows us that he did not make it out of that building unharmed. Which is really kind of wild, seeing as the only scar he got was on the one piece of his body that was thoroughly covered. But regardless, I think the scar looks pretty dope.
Everyone, please put away your guns. Having a shootout here would achieve nothing.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I feel like you have to understand the fact that this dude is a menace. Like, at the end of the day, they are law enforcement, and this man is a terrorist. So I get where they're coming from. And Giovanni actually tells Nier to respectfully miss me with that bullshit. But Nier doubles down and reiterates the same claim from episode 27.
Remember that our primary objective is still to catch Kira. Killing Mello right now will do nothing to benefit our investigation.
And again, he's not wrong. I mean, if nothing else, you gotta give it to him for sticking to his guns on that. No matter how much it costs, well, everyone else.
It seems like things have been going just as you planned, Nier.
Yes.
Wait, what? Did you plan for the notebook to fall into the hands of the mafia? Did you plan for the majority of your team to get killed? What are y'all talking about?
I take it you've already heard all about the second L from Lindner by now. I've pretty much figured out who Kira is, and it's mostly thanks to everything you've done.
So apparently, Lindner has divulged the information regarding the second L possibly being Kira, which I'm assuming is part of the plan. Which, okay, but let me ask you this, Nier. Was it also a part of the plan to get him here so that you could piss him off to the point that he shoots you?
Shut up, Nier!
Because if that's the case, you're killing it, my guy.
Mello, if you really want to shoot me, then go ahead and do it.
So it's hard for me to tell if he just doesn't care about his own life or if he just doesn't realize that this man was very much ready to kill him.
Stop!
But regardless, Lindner jumps in front of the gun and tells Mello to get his shit together. Because if he shoots Nier, then they'll shoot him and then everybody loses. Well, everybody except for Kira. And after she says that, everyone just goes back to normal, with Mello saying,
"Anyway, I'm only here for one thing. I came to take back that photograph you have."
And okay, I mean, I guess it would make sense that he'd want that. I imagine Mello might have gone back to Whammy's house to look for it or something, and maybe Roger told him that Nier took it when he left. But yeah, after he says that, Nier goes ahead and tosses him the picture, and tells him that he's already dealt with anyone who might have any information on him, thus ensuring that his identity remains safe. And I also want to note the note on the back of the picture which says, "Dear Mello." And that's it. I'm not entirely sure what to make of that. I don't know if Nier wrote that or someone else did. It's not really all that clear. But following that, Nier asks Mello if this was really the only reason he came all the way down here. And once he says that, this happens. And I kinda hate this. Like, a lot. Because I get what they're going for with this. Like, it's meant to be a reference to the bells heard throughout episode 25. But it just doesn't make any sense to play that sound right now. Like, where then the bells were meant to evoke L's impending death and his feelings surrounding that, here it just seems like a hollow gesture. Like, there's no reason for that to be playing because neither of these characters are of the belief that they're going to die soon. Hell, Nier just explained to Mello that he's already taken steps to ensure that Mello stays alive. Like, the sound of the bell is just a reference. And the same thing goes for the background being showcased here, that stained glass that we also saw in episode 25. It's just there to be like, "Member L? You member?" Except the conversation they're having has nothing to do with L, or even the Whammy's house, really. All they're doing right now is sharing some information. There's just no depth to either of those things, the bell or the stained glass. They're just references for the sake of being references, and I find that to be kinda ass, to be honest. But whatever. Mello then goes on to make it clear that he still does not fuck with Nier. But because Nier did him a solid by taking that picture that he left behind, he decides to go ahead and throw him a bone.
So I'll settle my debt.
The killer notebook. It belongs to a Shinigami. Whoever touches it is able to see a god of death.
And yeah, now Nier and the SBK have been made aware of the existence of Shinigami. Though, to be fair, Rester and Giovanni are both like, this man's capping. But Nier's like, I believe him, because that shit sounds too crazy to be a lie. Which is fair. Nier also mentions that if he was going to feed them false information, he'd have come up with something more believable than that. Which is also fair. And honestly, I'm surprised these guys don't believe him. Like, they need to take a page out of Rod's book.
It's a notebook that kills people. Hell, nothing surprises me anymore.
Now, after that, Mello goes on to drop some more useful information.
The notebook I obtained had previously belonged to another Shinigami, perhaps even Kira himself. Also, some of the rules written inside are actually fake.
And that's huge. Because now Nier, who is already established to have a working relationship with the Kira task force and is already assuming that L number 2 is Kira, has crucial knowledge that could potentially lead to some big trouble for Light, especially if he can correctly deduce which of the rules is the fake one. So yeah, this is definitely a big moment for Nier and the SPK. And with that, Mello turns to take his leave. But not before our duo shares this cute little moments where both of them engage in their own unique quirks, with Mello biting into a piece of chocolate, as we've seen him do plenty of times before, and Nier brings a finger to his hair to twirl it, which we've also seen him do numerous times in these last few episodes. And it's actually kinda interesting because both of these quirks are also emblematic of L too, with the chocolate being akin to L's love of sweets and the hair twirling being similar to the way that L used to twirl or rub his feet together. But yeah, after doing this, they end up saying,
which of us is gonna reach Kira first, I wonder?
The race is on.
We're both headed towards the same destination. I'm waiting for you.
Right.
And it's cute. I mean, like, it's very brotherly. Like, they're engaging in a nice friendly competition while talking a little shit. Like the way Mello says, I'll be waiting for you, claiming that he's the one that's gonna reach the finish line first. And if it were just the two of them here, I'd say this scene is kinda perfect. But because the rest of the SPK is there, it just feels a little awkward. Because given their history with Mello and the fact that he wiped out the majority of their team, the fact that Nier is smiling and giggling and shit would probably piss me the fuck off. But with that being said, welcome back to How to Use It. First up, if a Death Note owner accidentally misspells a name 4 times, that person will be free from being killed by the Death Note. However, if they intentionally misspell the name 4 times, the Death Note owner will die. So this one's pretty self-explanatory, but also pretty interesting. A lot of the time I see this rule referenced is in regard to Light's second use of the Death Note, wherein he wrote down this douchebag's name. And if you look at the page that Light wrote on, you can see that he wrote down the name, looks like around 8 times. So the only logical way to explain that would be that he wrote the name correctly one of the first 4 times he attempted it, which isn't too hard to believe, honestly. Also, when it comes to that rule, I do wonder if it's on a per Death Note basis. Like, does it render you immune to death by any Death Note, or just that specific notebook? Also, the really interesting part of this rule is the second half, wherein the user will die if they intentionally misspell the name 4 times. I imagine that's there in case someone tries to make themselves immune to being killed by the Death Note, which would kind of imply that the immunity might extend to other Death Notes. Because, I mean, if you're in possession of a notebook yourself, then you wouldn't really need to make yourself immune to being killed by that Death Note. I mean, sure, it could happen, someone taking your notebook and writing your name in it, but that seems unlikely. What seems more likely is that someone using a different notebook would try to write your name in it, which leads me to believe that the immunity must be spread across all Death Notes. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure. But hey, let me know what y'all think in the comment section. But okay, next up, the person whose name was misspelled 4 times on purpose will not be free of death by a Death Note. And that makes sense. It just means that you can't have someone sacrifice themselves by writing and misspelling your name 4 times so that you can have immunity. And yeah, now when we get back from the break, we see Nier trying to figure out which of the rules is fake. And I guess he's in need of a bit of divination in order to figure it out, because we can see that he's surrounded by some tarot cards. And they seem to be coming in handy, because he manages to come to the correct conclusion pretty quickly.
The false rule must be the one that states a person will die if he doesn't write a name within 13 days.
And yeah, that makes sense as the best option. I mean, in regard to the rules on the front page of the notebook, the ones that we went over back in episodes 1 and 24, the task force has seen them all play out in one way or another. And Nier would have knowledge regarding all of that because he and L number 2 have already shared information with each other. The only rules that haven't been tested are the 2 fake rules. And since one of them, the one stating that if this Death Note is made unusable by tearing it up or burning it, all the humans who have touched the Death Note till then will die, is not something that can be confirmed since the notebook still exists, then that means that the best choice for the fake rule would be the 13-day rule. And so, with his theory in hand, Nier decides to reach out to L number 2 to get his thoughts on it. But of course, before that, he has to tell him that
we caught Mello. He escaped soon afterwards. We were able to interrogate him for a while.
Which is actually hilarious, because it's so obvious that he's just full of shit, to the point where even Light calls him out for it.
He didn't really escape, did he? You let him get away, am I right?
But Nier just doubles down and quickly pivots to the real reason for his call. But before we actually get into that, I do want to comment on how infuriating that has to be for the task force. Like, to call and tell us that y'all had this man locked up to the point where you had the opportunity to interrogate him, and yet somehow he just got away is just like, bitch, that dude got 2 of our directors killed, and you just let him go? You little piece of shit.
Anyway, Mello mentioned that there was some sort of shinigami attached to the notebook. Have you been able to confirm the existence of such a creature?
So Light does go on to confirm their existence, saying that he never mentioned it before because he was sure that Nier wouldn't believe him, which, I mean, fair. Nier then wonders if there's any way that he could speak to the Shinigami, but Ryuk straight up says, nah, I'm good, which I thought was kind of funny. But after that, Nier goes on to say that the reason he wants to speak to the Shinigami is because when it comes to the rules in the notebook,
I have reason to believe that one of them is fake.
And as you could probably tell, this catches everyone by surprise. And I kind of like the fact that we focus on the task force's reaction and not Light's. Instead, we're only privy to Light's voice as he says,
a fake rule?
And to his credit, he's not giving anything away, despite the fact that I'm sure he's sweating bullets right now. Nier then follows up his statement by straight up asking L number 2 which of the rules he thinks is fake. And it's just so, like the thing about this moment is that Nier doesn't even fully understand just how much he's screwing Light over by asking this, because he's essentially forcing him to self-incriminate. Like, Light has two options: answer wrong and look ridiculously stupid once Nier tells his theory, which Light would then have to agree with anyway in order to save face, which, like, when I think about it, answering wrong shouldn't even really be an option because of how stupid it would make him look. So that leaves the only other option, which is to say, the 13-day rule, which then means that the two smartest people working on this investigation have come to the same conclusion that the 13-day rule seems sketchy as hell, meaning that Light's and Misa's whole exoneration now has to be called into question, which, whew, thank goodness the chief ain't alive for this shit.
The obvious choice would be the one stating that the owner of a notebook will die if they don't write a new name in it every 13 days. I don't believe that.
So, I don't know if you necessarily needed to add that last part, because it honestly just makes you seem hella sketchy, bro. Because now it just seems like you were thinking that they were all stupid for ever believing that in the first place, and that you were just using their stupidity to your advantage so that you'd be let off the hook.
Shinigami, are any of them false? No, they are all real.
And I'm not gonna lie, Light kinda fumbled with that one. I understand why he asked that question. He wanted to put an end to this right here, right now, by having Ryu confirm that all the rules are real. Basically the same way Rim did all those years ago. And if the confirmation comes straight from the Shinigami's mouth, then it's gotta be legit, right? Wrong. That shit might have worked on the task force, but just like his predecessor before him, Nier's not buying it, as he basically goes on to say that that Shinigami is a plant. Also, just look at Nier's face after Light says that shit. Lil bro is ecstatic. He's like, the Shinigami is there? In the room with you? Just chilling, ready to answer questions for y'all? Psh, oh, so you're definitely Kira. And the thing is, it's not even like he heard Ryuk's response. He's only working off the fact that L number 2 is able to casually speak to the Shinigami and ask him questions. That fact alone is what's making him feel confident in regard to his theory about L number 2 being Kira, as he goes on to say,
I think I'm beginning to get the picture. In other words, Kira is there in the room, and he's making the Shinigami lie on his behalf.
And even Ryuk's like,
whoa, this guy's good. He nailed it.
Now from there, the conversation switches to the other members of the task force, as Matsuda goes on to say that he's kind of confused about the whole situation, saying that even if the Shinigami is lying and the rule is fake, it shouldn't change anything. And to be fair, I can understand why he's saying that. I mean, Aizawa does break it down for him, saying that if the 13-day rule is bullshit, then that means there was no reason to let Light and Misa off the hook. But the thing is, from Matsuda's perspective, it seems obvious that Light isn't Kira, because the chief made a point to say that he definitely wasn't moments before he died. But I would argue that while it may have been confirmed by the chief that Light isn't Kira now, it doesn't mean that he wasn't Kira then. But yeah, after things get quiet, Nier jumps back in and says something pretty surprising.
I will volunteer to write down Mello's real name in the notebook.
So I'm pretty sure he's lying. Like, he'd have to be, right? And I'm not saying that because I think he wouldn't sacrifice Mello, because I do believe that he'd be willing to sacrifice Mello for the sake of the investigation. No, I'm more so saying he's lying because this doesn't make sense. Not the idea itself, that's self-explanatory, but what I'm saying is that there's really no reason he should want to test it out so badly that he'd be willing to risk both his and Mello's lives. Because, to be clear, Nier doesn't know that L number 2, that Light, was ever suspected of being Kira, and that the 13-day rule is what ultimately cleared him of all charges. So, without that knowledge, this test, using himself and Mello as the test subjects, doesn't really make sense, unless he's lying, in which case, okay, he's just saying that so that he can get his hands on the notebook. And when I think about it like that, it's smart. I mean, he knows that the task force hates Mello. Like, he abducted Director Takemura, he abducted Sayu, he took the notebook, and his actions ultimately led to the death of the chief. Like, they should all be like, fuck Mello, all my homies hate Mello. But let's see what they actually have to say about all of this.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
If Nier is willing, I wouldn't stop him.
I'm against the idea myself.
I feel the same. I'm opposed to the test. You should respect the deputy director's wishes to the end.
Okay, so before we continue, I have to point something out real quick. This is the very first time that Mogi has ever spoken to Light that we've seen. And I'm not even fucking kidding, I actually checked. And it wasn't even hard because, as we've established, dude hardly ever talks as is. In fact, the person he's had the most conversation with so far is actually Misa. But yeah, Light and Mogi don't actually ever share any screen time with each other until episode 14, when he's following Light around. And they don't actually share a scene where Light actually knows he's there until episode 18. And to be clear, Light does speak to him in that episode.
That's amazing, Mogi.
But Mogi didn't say shit to that man in response. And that's it. While they do share plenty of scenes together in the episodes that follow, neither of them ever interact again until now, with this being the very first time Mogi has directly addressed Light. And yeah, I noticed it while writing the video for episode 20, and I've just been waiting for it to finally happen, and here we are. But anyway, in regard to what they said, it looks like Matsuda is really the only one who's down for doing it, meaning that overall, it's gonna be a no from us, dog.
Nier, we've talked it over and we can't allow you to use the notebook like that.
But Nier's quick to shrug it off, and instead shifts gears once again by addressing the task force as a whole, as opposed to just L number 2. And what he says is, well, let's just hear it.
To the members of the Japanese task force, was there ever a point in the investigation where the second L was suspected to be Kira, even if the suspicions were later dropped?
And I love Light's expression, like this little bitch. Little bro is just sowing the seeds of dissent, and I'm just loving it. And he doesn't even stop there, because he goes on to say that if y'all have been listening in and now see L number 2 for the fraud that he is, then call me, beat me, if you want to reach me. And from there he hangs up, and once he does, we see the camera focus in on Aizawa, where we see that he has been chosen to be our representative for the color green. And I think it suits him well, aesthetically and narratively, because him taking on the color green makes a lot of sense due to the fact that green is created by way of combining both yellow and blue. And I imagine this is meant to kind of show us that Aizawa is a blend of both Matsuda and Ryuzaki. Matsuda in the sense that he really doesn't want to believe that Light could be Kira, but Ryuzaki in the sense that deep down he's begun to legitimately suspect him yet again. And I think that's pretty cool. Also, I guess I have to add the fact that Ryuk has the blue color scheme now too. I just don't think about it. Moving on.
Nier, I have to kill him.
Yeah, you really do. That man is screwing your whole game up right now. But the thing is, how you gonna do it? Well, let's find out. So the scene transitions to the Oval Office, where we see the president getting a call from none other than Kira.
This is Kira.
Is this a joke?
No, but the way you're being portrayed definitely feels like you might be the joke here. But after Kira proves he is who he says he is, he thanks the president for publicly glazing him on national TV. However,
even that much isn't enough.
As he goes on to say that the SPK is still gunning for him, and he's about fed up with that shit. So he deadass blackmails the president of the United States into using the American police, the CIA, the FBI, and all other law enforcement agencies at his disposal to hunt them down. And once he finds them, Kira tells him that he wants him to send that information to a third party, finishing it up by saying,
Mr. President, whether you live a long life or not is up to you.
Which is just knuckin' futs. But the crazy part is, had the president not gone on national TV and said that shit, then this probably wouldn't be happening. Like, you made it known that you were afraid of this man, which, don't get me wrong, you damn well should be. Everyone should be. But you making that broadcast just kinda made you more of a target, to be honest. But regardless, this is where we are now. And to be clear, the president agrees to help. He agrees to find the location of American citizens so that they can be killed by Kira. You, sir, are a pussy. But moving on. From there, we transition to an airport, where we see that old Demegawa, who's the third party Kira had mentioned, is making his way to New York City, which, as we saw from the cityscape earlier in the episode, back when Mello was waiting for Lintner to get out of the shower, is where the SPK is currently located. So yeah, there's not too much to say about this quick scene, other than the fact that Demegawa is losing his shit with how excited he is.
I don't know what's gonna happen when we get there. Hell, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore, and I don't really care.
This dude is such a character. Who'd have thought he'd have come this far after popping up at the end of episode 10? But anyway, from there we switch to Aizawa and Ide sitting at a computer together. And while they work, we hear Aizawa thinking about the situation concerning Light possibly being Kira, recalling how bold Ryuzaki was when it came to his suspicions of Light, and how that ultimately got him killed. Like, Aizawa does want to pursue things regarding Light as a suspect, but he just doesn't know how to go about doing it. That's when Ide cuts in and says,
Aizawa, we have a long history. I can tell exactly what you're thinking about.
I never really got the feeling that they were all that close. But I guess it makes sense. Ide was there for him when he went back to the MPA and ultimately decided to join the task force himself. So they've been together for about half a decade now, if not longer. And as Ide goes on to talk, he says that he specifically joined the task force because he wanted to work with Aizawa, and that if Aizawa wanted to pursue his investigation with Light, then he would fully support him in doing that. Aizawa then says that he'll follow through with reaching out to Nier, but he won't tell Light about it, with Ide telling him that he won't tell anyone either. But unfortunately for them, well, Light's been listening in on their whole conversation from the other side of this slightly ajar door. So yeah, so much for keeping that a secret. But after hearing them say all that, Light strolls on in with his tea or coffee or whatever and pretends like he didn't hear a damn thing. And as he sits down at his desk, we see Aizawa turn to him and think to himself,
Light, I really want to believe that you're not Kira.
And I just love the delivery of that line. I love how angry he sounds as he says it. Like, I believe that he really doesn't want it to be him. But I feel like the anger comes from the fact that he feels pretty confident that it is him, and he's pissed at the fact that Light's been manipulating them all for so long. For as long as he's known them, really. It's just such a complicated situation that's clearly stirring up some complex emotions in Aizawa right now, and I dig it. Now from there we see Matsuda bust into the room and say,
Turn on the TV! It's Demegawa!
And as we transition back to Demegawa, we see just how much influence Kira really has. Because not only is Demegawa at the SPK headquarters, circling it in a helicopter, but below him, in the streets of New York City, we can see hundreds of people currently surrounding the building trying to bust their way in. It's a full-scale riot. And it gets even wilder when you pause and look at the people below. Like, these people are holding crowbars and bats, and if you look at their arms, you can see that they're wearing armbands that say Kira, like they're fucking Nazis wearing swastika bands. Like, it's just, bro, are these your people? Is this your king? Dumb? Jeez. Anyway, from there we quickly transition to Misa, who we see is ready and waiting with her Shinigami eyes to write down the SPK members' names once they've been dragged out. Which, to be clear, is the whole goal here. Having this mob bust in there and grab the SPK members so that they can be brought outside and have their faces aired on Sakura TV, thus allowing Misa to write each of their names down. It's actually really smart, and realistically, you probably don't even need Misa, because this unruly group looks like it'd be more than willing to just kill the SPK members for you, honestly. But anyway, inside the SPK headquarters, we see the group trying to figure out what their next steps ought to be, when suddenly they get a call from L number 2. And just listen.
What's going on, Nier?
Surely it couldn't be that the SPK's security was so lax that even a normal citizen could find out where it was located.
And man, I don't understand how you could be in that room with Light and not see that he is clearly just the bad guy here. Like, he's not even hiding it at this point. He's one mustache twirl away from just being a straight up cartoon villain. Like, this shit is so ridiculous. I get that you can't arrest him over the tone of his voice, but Bruh. Also, a random thing I noticed is that Light changed clothes for some reason. Like he went from wearing a turtleneck to a long-sleeved dress shirt. Okay, but anyway, Nier's pissed because he can clearly see this for what it is. But at this point, he and his team are thoroughly screwed, which is why the episode ends with Light thinking,
"Well, Nier, looks like I win."
Wait. Wrong clip. Let's try that again. Which is why the episode ends with Light thinking,
"I win, Nier."
Followed by a flash of lightning in the background, which is yet another reference to episode 25 that just doesn't make any sense because it's fucking daytime and it's not even this is so stupid. It's just another reference for the sake of being a reference. Though this time around, I will say that the use of this particular imagery could mean that, just like in episode 25, Light might actually win here. But I guess we'll find that out next time, because for now, roll credits. Anyway, that's the end of this video. Obviously, this was a little different from what y'all are used to, but I hope y'all still enjoyed it. But before we wrap this one up, I wanted to give a special shout out to the awesome artist who actually created the version of me that you're seeing right now. Her name's Meg, and she does phenomenal work. I sent her these couple of images and told her what I was kind of looking for, and she worked her magic with the end result being, well, me. And I dig it, like, a lot, which is why I wanted to make sure I gave her a shout out, as well as took the time to include a link to her Fiverr page in the description of this video. So if you're looking for someone to draw an avatar for you or a custom character, be sure to check out her page. Also, while I have you, let me also give a shout out to my editor Mar, who helped me out with this video, as she has been doing for like the last 5 or 6. She's been great, honestly, especially with trying to adapt to this different style that I just randomly threw at her with very little forewarning. So thank you, Mar, for working with me on that. And then also, let me give a shout out to Asia, my queen, who, as I've mentioned a few times, is the one who does the thumbnails for all of these videos. Honestly, I attribute a lot of this channel's growth to her, seeing as before she started doing the thumbnails, I only had 19 subscribers. But when I posted the first one with her thumbnail for episode 6, things just started popping off in a very serious way. Like, we just hit 21,000 subscribers, which, oh my gosh, is fucking insane. But yeah, I just wanted to give a special thanks to the 3 of them. And also, as always, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to those over on our Patreon. And this time we're starting from the top with our official overanalyzers. Also, don't trip about what I'm reading out of, but I promise it's not real. Probably. So anyway, thank you Asia, Cavarax XC, Chicken Wugget, C-Mart, Cody for Now, Croy Raiden, Amelia, I Am the Blonde Asshole, and Joey Hellbig. And in addition to them, I want to give a big thanks to our remarkable researchers: Arrow Falcon Green, Game and Alchemist, Legend Dragon, Pellets, Staff of the Crystal Serpent, The Best, Trinity Schiffer, Tyrant Link, Vanellian, and Yggdrasil. And lastly, thank you to all our invaluable investigators and our admirable assessors, who I'm actually going to just let scroll while I ramble for a minute. So going forward, I'm thinking I'll just be posting once a month. I say just as if I've been posting more often than that or something. But yeah, I'm going for a goal of posting on the 1st of every month for the rest of the year, which I think is possible. I mean, I'm already 2 ahead thanks to the Patreon, which means I have April and May covered, both of which are going to be Code Geass videos, by the way. Actually, this video today was supposed to be a Code Geass video, but I still need to incorporate the comment section in there, and I'm just having a bit of trouble picking which comments I want to choose from the fucking 1,300 plus comments in those 3 videos. Whew. So I'm giving myself a little more time on that. Plus, this was the first video that I edited using this particular format and incorporating the avatar. I've never really done anything like this before, so I was kind of getting the hang of what I wanted it to look like. Like, maybe y'all could tell, but the editing styles changed throughout this video in little ways, and you'll see it change again in the videos that follow. I was just trying to get a feel for it, you know? So because this was the first one, the test one, I wanted it to be the first one to get put out, as opposed to having the Code Geass one, the one that I feel is a little more consistent with the style, put out first, if that makes sense. Also, for those of y'all who are still here, what did you think of it? Did you like the new style? Do y'all like the avatar? Let me know. But yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and wrap this thing up right here. As always, if you liked the video, then consider dropping a like. If you really liked it, then consider subscribing. And if you just loved it and want to see more sooner, then come on over to the Patreon. Link is in the description. Anyway, that's all for this time. Until next time, friends, peace.